It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. You know, the kind of day little girls dream about. The white dress, the flowers, the music, the love. And for a while, it felt exactly like that. Everything was perfect. The weather was sunny, but not too hot. The decorations looked straight out of a wedding magazine. And I was standing there, in my dream dress, next to Jason, the man I was about to marry. I could barely keep my emotions together. My hands were shaking, but in the best possible way. My mom kept dabbing at her tears with a tissue. My dad was pretending not to cry, though his red eyes gave him away. And all our friends and family were gathered, smiling, laughing, celebrating us. I felt so loved, so lucky. Jason squeezed my hand and leaned in to whisper, "You look incredible. I'm the luckiest guy here." His words made my heart skip. I believed him. I believed in us. The ceremony flew by in a blur, vows, rings, kisses. Before I knew it, we were at the reception, dancing under fairy lights strung across the ceiling. The soft glow made everything feel like a dream. People clinked their glasses, laughed too loud, took endless photos. Everything was perfect. And then came the toasts. You know how at weddings, there's always that moment when people start sharing stories. Sweet ones, funny ones, maybe even a little embarrassing. I was actually looking forward to that part. It made everything feel personal, real. Sarah, my best friend since college, stood up, holding her glass of champagne. She looked stunning in her bridesmaid dress, her long blonde hair curled perfectly. She smiled at me, her eyes shiny with emotion, or maybe it was the champagne, and cleared her throat. "To Emily and Jason," she began, her voice trembling just slightly. I've known Emily for almost 10 years, and I can honestly say she's one of the most loving, generous, and stubborn people I've ever met. The crowd chuckled. I smiled, feeling my cheeks flush. I remember when Emily first told me about Jason. She was so nervous, like a teenager with a crush. And when I met him, I thought, wow, he's definitely charming. Laughter echoed around the room. Jason chuckled, raising his glass. Sarah took a sip, then continued. But seriously, I watched their relationship grow, through all the ups and downs. And I just knew, that they were meant for each other. Even when, she paused, her eyes flickering toward Jason for a second too long. Even when things got complicated. A weird murmur rippled through the crowd, but it was subtle, like a breeze you almost don't notice. I tilted my head, confused, but Sarah kept going, as if nothing had happened. What I love most about you two is that you never gave up on each other. Even after, that one night. She laughed nervously. You know what I'm talking about, Jason. Jason's smile froze. It was slight, but I saw it. A twitch in his jaw. His fingers gripped his glass tighter. My heart dropped into my stomach. What night was she talking about? Sarah must have realized the room had shifted because she coughed awkwardly and tried to cover it up. I mean, relationships aren't perfect, right? But you guys made it through everything. That's real love. The crowd applauded, but it felt forced. I clapped too, like I was on autopilot, my mind spinning. Jason didn't look at me. He kept sipping his drink, eyes on the table. That one night, the words repeated in my head like a drumbeat. Was it nothing? A joke? Or was it something? I swallowed hard. My throat dry despite the glass of champagne in front of me. Everyone went back to eating, drinking, dancing, but my mind stayed stuck on Sarah's words. That one night, Jason's frozen smile, Sarah's nervous laugh. Suddenly, the room felt too warm. The fairy lights above us, which had felt so magical just minutes ago, now seemed to close in on me. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I looked at Jason, hoping for, I don't know, a sign. But he was laughing now, talking to his cousin, as if nothing had happened. Too normal, too perfect. I forced a smile, but inside, something cracked. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. And now, I wasn't so sure. I tried to shake it off. Maybe Sarah had one too many glasses of champagne. Weddings make people emotional, right? Sometimes they say weird things. That had to be it. But no matter how hard I tried to push her words out of my mind, they clung to me like wet clothes. That one night, I caught myself staring at Jason, studying every small movement. The way he smiled at guests, laughed at jokes, how his hand rested on my lower back. All of it felt staged. Or maybe it was just me spiraling. God, was I overreacting? But then Sarah walked past me, heading toward the bar, and I couldn't stop myself. I followed her. "Hey," I said, tapping her shoulder. She turned, surprised, glass already in her hand. Wasn't my toast awful? I rambled so much." She laughed nervously. I forced a smile. "No, it was great. Really." My voice felt tight. "But what did you mean by that one night?" Her face froze for a split second, barely noticeable, but I caught it. Then she laughed, too high-pitched. "Oh, that. Just remember when Jason tried to cook for you that one time and nearly set your kitchen on fire?" She sipped her drink quickly, eyes darting around. I blinked. "Sarah, that never happened." The color drained from her face. An awkward beat passed between us. I could hear the DJ in the background switching to some upbeat pop song, guests cheering. It felt surreal, like the world was still spinning, but I was stuck. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her hand trembled slightly as she clutched her glass. "Sarah," I pressed, my voice lower now, almost pleading. "What night were you talking about?" She looked around again, like someone might be listening, then leaned in closer. Her breath smelled of champagne and nerves. "Emily, I didn't mean anything. I swear. It was stupid. I shouldn't have said that." "That's not an answer." Her eyes welled up, tears threatening to spill. "It's not my place. Please, just let it go." But how could I? My best friend had just hinted, in front of everyone, that there was something I didn't know. Something about Jason. And now she was acting like I was crazy for asking. I felt a wave of nausea hit me. "Sarah, did something happen? Between you and Jason?" Her eyes widened, genuine horror flashing across her face. "No. God, no. Nothing like that. I would never." But her reaction only made things worse. Because if it wasn't her, then who? I backed away, my head pounding. I needed air. I stumbled out onto the terrace, the cool night breeze hitting my flushed skin. I sucked in deep breaths, trying to calm the storm inside me. Jason found me a minute later. "There you are," he said, wrapping his arms around me from behind. I tensed. "You okay?" His voice was soft, filled with concern, or maybe just good acting. I pulled away slightly to look at him. What did Sarah mean in her toast? His smile faltered for a fraction of a second. There it was again, that tiny crack in his perfect facade. "She was drunk," he said quickly, brushing it off. "You know how she gets." I stared at him, searching his face for any sign of a lie. "She mentioned a night. Something complicated." He chuckled, but it sounded forced. "Babe, it's nothing. Probably that time we had that huge fight about the honeymoon. Remember? She was there when we argued." That didn't sit right. Sarah would never hint at a simple argument like that, not in the way she had. "Jason," I whispered, my throat tight. "If there's something I need to know, this is the time to tell me." For a split second, I thought I saw it, guilt. Deep, heavy guilt flickering in his eyes. But then it was gone, replaced by that same charming smile that had made me fall for him in the first place. "There's nothing, Em. I love you. That's all that matters." But as he pulled me back into his arms, my mind raced. I wanted to believe him, I really did. But my gut screamed that something was off. And now, I wasn't sure if I was marrying the man I thought I knew, or a complete stranger. The rest of the night felt like I was floating outside my own body. I smiled when I was supposed to, nodded during conversations, even danced when Jason pulled me onto the dance floor. But inside, I was unraveling. Every time I glanced at Sarah, she avoided my eyes, focusing too hard on her drink or talking to other guests. Jason, on the other hand, was the perfect groom, attentive, loving, his hand glued to mine like nothing was wrong. But I couldn't stop hearing Sarah's voice in my head. That one night. What the hell had she meant? I needed answers, but no one was going to give them to me tonight. Not in front of all these people. So I waited, pretending everything was perfect while inside I was screaming. It wasn't until the party started winding down, with guests hugging us goodbye and the DJ packing up, that I finally saw my chance. I found Sarah near the restroom alone, scrolling through her phone like she hadn't just dropped a bomb on my life hours ago. My heels clicked loudly as I approached, but she didn't look up. "Sarah," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. She jumped slightly, locking her screen. Hey, I was just..." "Cut the crap." My hands were trembling now, but I held my ground. "We're alone. No one's listening. Tell me what you meant." Her face crumbled, like she'd been holding back tears all night. "Emily, I can't. It's not my place." "It is your place if you know something that could ruin my marriage." She looked around, as if searching for an escape, but there wasn't one. We both knew it. "I'm trying to protect you," she whispered. "By lying? By letting me walk into this blind." Her shoulders sagged in defeat. She bit her lip, her eyes glossing over. "It was last summer," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That weekend when you went to visit your mom. Jason, he was out with some friends. I wasn't supposed to be there. I ended up at the same bar. I saw him." I felt my stomach drop. "Saw him doing what?" She hesitated, but then the dam broke. He was with another woman. They were close. Too close. I left before anything else happened, but it was obvious. I confronted him about it a week later. Told him I'd keep it between us if it was a mistake. He swore nothing serious happened, that it was just a stupid drunk moment. The room spun around me. I leaned against the wall, trying to steady myself, and you decided not to tell me. I thought he regretted it, and I didn't want to ruin everything between you two. He begged me not to. I let out a bitter laugh. "So instead, you waited until my wedding day to blurt it out during a toast?" Tears streamed down her face now. It slipped. "I didn't mean to. I was nervous, drunk. I'm so sorry, Em." I didn't even know what to say. Betrayal clawed at my chest. From Jason, from Sarah. It felt like my whole life had been built on a lie. "I need to go," I mumbled, pushing past her. I found Jason outside, helping load gifts into his friend's car. His face lit up when he saw me, but all I could see now was the mask, the lies underneath. "Hey, babe," he said, grinning. "We're almost done here." "Is it true?" I cut him off, my voice cold. His smile faltered. "What? Last summer? The bar? The other woman?" His mouth opened, but no words came out. The guilt was written all over his face now, clear as day. "Emily, don't lie to me." He ran a hand through his hair, looking like he wanted the ground to swallow him up. "It was nothing. I was drunk. It didn't mean anything. But it happened." He hesitated, then nodded. I felt like I couldn't breathe. "And you let me plan this wedding, stand up there in front of everyone. Why you kept this from me?" "I didn't want to lose you," he pleaded. "It was one mistake, I swear. I love you." I stood there, the weight of everything crashing down on me. The flowers, the decorations, the vows, all of it felt hollow now. I thought I'd feel rage, but instead there was just this deep, crushing emptiness. "I need to think," I whispered, turning away before he could say anything else. I didn't know where I was going, but I needed to get away. From him, from all of it. I walked down the empty street, my heels clacking against the pavement, but I barely noticed. My dress felt suffocating, heavy like it was pulling me down with every step. I didn't know where I was heading. I just needed to get away from that place, from Jason, from the nightmare my wedding had turned into. I found myself at a small park a few blocks away. It was almost midnight, and the playground was deserted. I sank onto one of the swings, gripping the chains as if they could somehow hold me together. My mind was racing, flashes of Jason's face, Sarah's trembling voice, the moment he nodded and confirmed everything. I thought about all the nights we spent planning the wedding, the vows we wrote together, the future I believed we were building. It all felt like a cruel joke now. I pulled out my phone, my hands still shaking. Dozens of missed calls and texts from Jason, a few from Sarah. I ignored them all. I scrolled through my contacts, hovering over my mom's name, but I couldn't bring myself to call her. What would I even say? "Hey Mom, the wedding's off because my now husband cheated on me, and my best friend kept it a secret." Yeah, that would go over great. Emily, the voice startled me. I turned to see Nick, Jason's best man, standing a few feet away. His tie was loosened, jacket slung over his shoulder, and he looked conflicted. What are you doing here? I asked, wiping my face quickly. I saw you leave. Jason's been freaking out. I thought, maybe you shouldn't be alone. I let out a bitter laugh. Kind of ironic, isn't it? I thought I wasn't alone this whole time, but apparently, I've been the third wheel in my own relationship. Nick shifted uncomfortably, but didn't say anything. He walked over and sat on the swing next to me, letting the silence stretch for a moment. I know you probably don't want to hear this, he finally said. But Jason's an idiot. He's been a mess about that night ever since it happened. I turned to him, anger bubbling up again. You knew too. He winced. Only after. He told me a few weeks later. I told him to come clean, but you know Jason. He thought if he buried it deep enough, it would just disappear. I shook my head. How could you all just keep this from me? Do I mean that little to everyone? No, Em, it wasn't like that. We were trying to protect you. I let out a hollow laugh. Funny how protecting me looks exactly like lying. Nick sighed, kicking at the dirt beneath his feet. You're right. We screwed up. But Jason really does love you. He was terrified of losing you. I didn't know what to say to that. Love? Was that what love looked like? Lies, secrets, and betrayal? Would you have told me if Sarah hadn't slipped up tonight? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Nick hesitated for a moment too long. I don't know. That was my answer. I stood up, brushing off my dress, even though it didn't matter anymore. I can't go back there. Not tonight. Nick nodded. I get it. Do you want me to call someone? A hotel? I thought about it. No, I'll figure it out. He looked like he wanted to say more, but stopped himself. If you need anything, call me. Seriously. I gave him a small, sad smile. Thanks, Nick. As he walked away, I sat back down on the swing, feeling the cool night air settle over me. The weight of everything was crushing, but there was also this strange clarity. I couldn't go back and pretend like nothing happened, but I also couldn't just walk away from everything without knowing what came next. I pulled out my phone again, this time opening Jason's texts. There were dozens. I'm sorry. Please talk to me. I love you. I hovered over the call button, my thumb trembling. Part of me wanted to scream at him, demand answers, closure, something. But another part of me was so exhausted, so completely drained, that I didn't know if I had the strength. Instead, I typed out a simple message. I need space. Don't contact me tonight. Then I turned off my phone. For the first time that night, I felt a tiny sliver of control. It wasn't much, but it was something. I looked up at the sky, the stars barely visible through the city lights, and wondered how everything had fallen apart so quickly. And worse, how I was supposed to pick up the pieces. The next morning, I woke up in a cheap motel room, the kind that smelled faintly of bleach and sadness. I hadn't planned on ending up there, but after wandering the streets for hours, too wired to sleep and too exhausted to think, it was the only place that didn't ask questions when I showed up in a wedding dress, mascara smeared down my face. I sat up slowly, my head pounding and my mouth dry. The events of the previous day hit me all over again like a freight train. The ruined wedding, Jason's betrayal, Sarah's confession. I felt numb. The kind of numb that comes when you've cried all the tears you had and there's nothing left but emptiness. I glanced at my phone, still turned off. Part of me wondered what chaos was waiting when I powered it back on. Texts, missed calls, maybe even social media posts from guests speculating on why the bride had stormed out of her own wedding. But I wasn't ready for any of that yet. Not until I figured out what the hell I was supposed to do next. There was a soft knock at the door. My heart leaped into my throat. Who would even know I was here? For a split second, I thought maybe it was Jason, that he'd somehow found me. But that was ridiculous. I hesitated before opening the door a crack. Emily. It was Sarah. Of all the people, she was the last one I expected to see. She looked awful. Her eyes were red and puffy, hair pulled into a messy bun, and she was clutching a coffee cup like it was her lifeline. I didn't say anything. I wasn't sure I even could. I called around, she said quietly. Figured you might need someone. I opened the door wider, but didn't step aside to let her in. You've done enough, don't you think? Her face crumpled at that, and for a moment, I thought she was going to burst into tears again. I know I messed up, Em. I know I don't deserve anything from you right now. But I needed to say I'm sorry. Really sorry. I crossed my arms over my chest, trying to keep myself together. You kept this from me for months, Sarah. You stood there as my maid of honor, smiling, giving speeches, pretending everything was perfect. She wiped her nose with her sleeve, her voice shaking. I thought I was protecting you. I thought, if it was just one stupid mistake, it wasn't worth ruining everything over. I scoffed. Well, congratulations. Everything's ruined anyway. She swallowed hard, tears spilling over. I know, and I hate myself for it. We stood there in silence for a beat, neither of us knowing what to say next. I could feel my anger bubbling under the surface, but there was also this strange, crushing sadness, like losing her was almost as painful as losing Jason. Why didn't you tell me? I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She exhaled shakily. Because I was scared. Scared you'd hate me. Scared it would all fall apart. And I was selfish. I didn't want to be the reason you were heartbroken. I shook my head. But you were. You both were. Sarah looked like she was about to crumble right there in the hallway. Please, Em. I know I can't fix this, but I can't lose you too. That word, too, stuck in my mind. I was already losing Jason, maybe forever. And now Sarah, my best friend since middle school, was about to disappear from my life too. Was I really ready for that? I sighed, stepping aside just enough to let her in. She looked shocked but slipped inside, sitting gingerly on the edge of the bed, while I sat opposite her in the room's lone chair. We sat there, the air thick with everything unsaid. Finally, Sarah broke the silence. Have you talked to Jason? I shook my head. I told him not to contact me. She nodded, as if that made sense, but there was something else in her expression, something hesitant. What? I asked, my patience thinning. She bit her lip. There's something else you should know. My stomach twisted into a knot. Seriously? There's more. She looked like she might throw up. That night, it wasn't just a one-time thing. The room spun around me. I stood up so fast the chair scraped against the floor. You said it was one night. That's what Jason told me at first, she rushed to explain. But I found out later it happened more than once. I didn't know how to tell you after that. It just got worse and worse. I could barely breathe. The betrayal was deeper than I thought. Not just one drunken mistake, but something that had happened multiple times. Everything inside me screamed to tell her to get out, to never speak to me again. But all I could do was sit there, my mind reeling. Get out, I whispered, my voice shaking. Emily, get out. I screamed this time, and she flinched before scrambling out the door, tears running down her face. I sank onto the bed, my whole body trembling. The pain was so sharp it felt physical, like my chest was splitting open. I was alone, completely and utterly alone. And the worst part, I didn't know if I would ever be able to trust anyone again. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the chipped wallpaper of the motel room, my mind completely blank. It was like my brain had short-circuited, unable to process the mess my life had become in less than 24 hours. The wedding, the love, the friendship, all of it shattered. I could still hear Sarah's voice in my head, repeating that one line. It wasn't just a one-time thing. That sentence had burrowed deep into my chest, leaving a burning, hollow ache. I finally powered on my phone. It buzzed to life immediately, lighting up with dozens of notifications. Missed calls from Jason, from my mom, from friends I hadn't spoken to in months, but who had attended the wedding. Texts flooded in, some asking if I was okay, others expressing shock, confusion, and sympathy. I scrolled through them without really reading, my thumb moving automatically. Then I saw his name. There were at least 20 messages from Jason, all sent throughout the night. Most of them were desperate apologies, pleas, and half explanations. I didn't want to read them, but my finger hovered over the latest one. I opened it. It was a long, rambling apology. He said he'd made the biggest mistake of his life, that he never meant to hurt me, that he didn't know what he was thinking. He kept insisting it didn't mean anything, that he loved me, that it was stupid and reckless, but he was willing to do anything to fix it. The words felt hollow, empty. I stared at them, feeling nothing, or maybe feeling too much. Then I noticed something at the bottom of the screen, an image file. He had sent me a photo. Curiosity got the better of me. I tapped on it. It was a picture of us, an old one, from when we first started dating. We were at the beach, sunburned and laughing, arms wrapped around each other. I remembered that day so clearly. It had been simple and perfect. No lies, no secrets. Just us. But now, looking at it, I felt like I was staring at strangers. Another message popped up. It was short. I'm outside. Please. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. My heart started racing. I hadn't even thought about the possibility of him finding me here. I leapt to the window, carefully peeking through the dusty curtains. And there he was. Jason stood by his car in the parking lot, still wearing his suit from yesterday, though now it was wrinkled, his tie loosened around his neck. He looked rough, like he hadn't slept, his hair messy, his face pale. He paced back and forth, running his hands through his hair, glancing up at my window as if he somehow knew I was watching. I ducked back, my heart pounding. What was I supposed to do? Confront him? Ignore him? Scream? Cry? I paced the room, my mind racing in a million different directions. Part of me wanted answers, real answers, not the half-truths Sarah had given me. But another part of me didn't think I could stand to look him in the eye. My phone buzzed again. Please, Emily. I just need to talk. One time. I squeezed my eyes shut, taking a deep breath. Against my better judgment, I walked to the door, my hand trembling as I grabbed the handle. I opened it just a crack. He saw me immediately, his face lighting up with a mixture of relief and guilt. He started walking towards me. I stepped outside, crossing my arms tightly over my chest, creating as much distance as I could without bolting back inside. He stopped a few feet away, his eyes scanning my face, like he was searching for something. Hope, maybe. But he wasn't going to find it. His voice broke the silence first. You look tired. I let out a bitter laugh. Really? That's what you're opening with? He winced, clearly realizing how stupid that sounded. I'm sorry. I didn't know what to say. I stared at him, the weight of everything crashing down on me again. Why? My voice cracked on the word, but I didn't care. Why did you do it? He opened his mouth, then shut it, like he didn't have the right answer. I don't know, he finally muttered. It was stupid. I was drunk. It didn't mean anything. You did it more than once. That hit him hard. I saw it in his face, the way his shoulders slumped, the way he avoided my eyes. He knew the lie wasn't going to work anymore. I didn't plan it, he said quietly. It got out of control. I clenched my fists. With my best friend, Jason. You slept with my best friend. He rubbed his face, his voice breaking. I know. I hate myself for it. We stood there in painful silence. Cars passed on the street. Somewhere nearby, someone slammed a door. Life kept going on, but I felt like I was frozen in place. I loved you, I whispered, his eyes filled with tears. I still love you. I shook my head. No, you don't get to say that. I turned to go back inside, but he stepped closer, reaching out. Please, don't go. I stopped, not turning around. My voice was low, filled with all the hurt I felt. I already did. I slammed the motel room door shut, my hand shaking as I leaned against it. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would explode right out of my chest. Jason's muffled voice came through the door, calling my name, but I didn't move. I stood there, breathing heavily, trying to keep myself from completely falling apart. I couldn't believe he had the nerve to show up here, to look me in the eye and say he still loved me. That wasn't love. Love wasn't sneaking around with my best friend. Love wasn't betraying someone you promised forever to. I let out a bitter laugh, the sound harsh and hollow in the empty room. I paced back and forth, my mind racing. Every memory I had with him now felt tainted, like someone had taken a black marker and scribbled all over them. Our first date, the time he surprised me with tickets to that concert I'd been dying to go to, even the moment he proposed. All of it felt fake now, like a cruel joke. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my hands gripping the sheets as if they were the only thing keeping me from falling apart completely. I wanted to scream, cry, break something, anything to get this anger and pain out of me. But I just sat there, numb. My phone buzzed again. I didn't want to look, but I did anyway. It was Sarah this time. "Emily, please. Can we talk? I'm so sorry." I threw the phone across the bed, disgusted. Her betrayal cut just as deep as Jason's, maybe even deeper. She was supposed to be my best friend. She was supposed to have my back, not sneak around behind it. I thought about all the times I'd vented to her about Jason when we fought, how she always told me I deserved better, that I was too good for him. The irony of it hit me like a slap in the face. Was she laughing behind my back the entire time, smiling at me while knowing exactly what she was doing? I stood up, grabbing my jacket. I couldn't stay in that room anymore. I needed air, space, anything to clear my head. Outside, the sun was starting to set, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink. It should have been beautiful, but all I felt was empty. I walked down the sidewalk, not really paying attention to where I was going. Cars passed by. People walked their dogs. Kids played in their yards. It was like the world hadn't stopped spinning even though mine had. I ended up at a small park nearby, collapsing onto a bench. I watched a little boy fly a kite, his dad laughing beside him, and for a second, I wondered if I'd ever feel that kind of simple happiness again. Right now, it felt impossible. My phone buzzed again, and against my better judgment, I checked it. Another message from Sarah. "I never meant to hurt you. It just happened. Please, Emily, I need to explain." The rage bubbled up inside me. She needed to explain? What was there to explain? That she'd been sneaking around with my fiancé for God knows how long. That she'd sat next to me during wedding dress shopping, helping me pick out the dress I was supposed to wear down the aisle to a man she was secretly sleeping with. I clenched my teeth, my hands gripping the phone so tightly I thought it might break. But then I surprised myself. I typed out a reply. "Meet me at the park. You have 10 minutes. I hit send before I could change my mind. If she wanted to talk so badly, fine. Let her say it to my face. The minutes dragged by, each one stretching out longer than the last. My heart raced as I kept glancing down the path, waiting. I wasn't sure what I was going to say to her, or if I'd even be able to hold myself together. Finally, I saw her. Sarah walked slowly toward me, her face pale, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She looked nervous, wringing her hands as she approached. I could see the guilt all over her. She stopped a few feet away, her voice trembling. "Emily." I crossed my arms tightly over my chest, keeping my expression hard. "Talk." She hesitated, then let out a shaky breath. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. It was a mistake." I laughed bitterly. A mistake? Was it a mistake the first time? Or the second? Or the 10th? Tears filled her eyes, but I didn't feel bad for her. She deserved this. "I was in a bad place," she whispered. "I was lonely. And Jason, he was there. It wasn't supposed to go this far." "That's your excuse." I snapped. "You were lonely? So you decided to destroy my life." She broke down then, covering her face with her hands, sobbing. But I didn't move to comfort her. "Not this time. I trusted you, Sarah," I said, my voice low but filled with anger. "You were my best friend." "I know," she cried. "I hate myself for it." We sat there in heavy silence, her sobs filling the space between us. And then, through her tears, she said something that made my stomach drop. "There's more I need to tell you." I froze when Sarah said that. Her words echoed in my head, over and over. "There's more I need to tell you." As if what she'd already done wasn't enough. My hands clenched into fists, my nails digging into my palms, but I didn't say anything. I just stared at her, waiting. She wiped her tears, her face blotchy and swollen, but her eyes held something else now, fear. It wasn't just a fling," she whispered, barely able to get the words out. "It's been going on longer than you think." My throat felt tight, like I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her to shut up, but I needed to hear it. I needed to know just how deep this betrayal went. How long? I asked, my voice cold. She hesitated, her lips trembling. Almost a year. A year. My knees felt weak, and I had to grip the edge of the bench to keep myself upright. A whole year. That meant all the holidays, the birthdays, even the engagement. He was with her the entire time. Every time we all hung out together, every dinner, every party. They were lying to me right in front of my face. I shook my head, laughing bitterly. You're unbelievable. Both of you. I didn't mean for it to happen, she said again, her voice breaking. It started as a mistake, but then I caught feelings. And Jason, he said he didn't know what he wanted anymore. Her words hit me like a punch in the gut. He didn't know what he wanted. Was that supposed to make me feel better? I stood up, my hands trembling. So what now? You two gonna play house together? Get married and pretend this is all normal? Sarah's face twisted with guilt. It's over between us. It's been over for weeks. That's why I wanted to tell you. I couldn't live with it anymore. I scoffed. You didn't tell me because you felt guilty. You told me because you got caught. Don't act like this is some noble confession. She didn't argue. She just stood there, crying silently. I wanted to leave, to walk away and never look back, but there was still something gnawing at me. Why the hell did you come to my dress fitting? Why help me plan this wedding if you knew what you'd done? She sank onto the bench, her head in her hands. Because I thought maybe if I could still be there for you, if I could pretend like nothing happened, I could fix it somehow. I know how stupid that sounds. I just didn't want to lose you. I let out a hollow laugh. Well, congrats. You lost me. Her shoulders shook as she sobbed harder, but I didn't feel bad. Not anymore. I'd wasted enough tears on both of them. I turned to leave, but then she called out, her voice desperate. Emily, wait. There's something else about Jason. I stopped in my tracks, my stomach twisting again. What now? She hesitated, then stood up, wringing her hands. I found out he's been seeing someone else too. Not just me. I blinked, trying to process her words. You're telling me that while he was cheating on me with you, he was cheating on you too? She nodded, tears still streaming down her face. I only found out a few days ago. That's why I wanted to tell you everything. He's been lying to both of us. It was like every piece of my life was crumbling at once. Jason hadn't just betrayed me. He'd been playing everyone. A strange calm washed over me then, a numbness that made it easier to breathe. You deserve each other, I muttered before walking away. This time, I didn't look back. I walked away without looking back, each step feeling heavier than the last. The world around me seemed to blur, the sounds of the city fading into the background as my mind raced. I kept replaying Sarah's words over and over. Jason wasn't just cheating on me with her. He had someone else too. It felt like my heart had been ripped out, leaving an empty, aching hole where it used to be. I didn't know where I was going, only that I needed to get away from that place, away from her, away from him. The streets were crowded with people, but I felt completely alone, like I was in a bubble that no one else could see. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I immediately pulled it out, expecting to see Jason's name on the screen. It wasn't him. It was my best friend, Lily. She'd been texting me all day, probably wondering why I hadn't responded. I stared at the message, feeling a pang of guilt for not reaching out to her sooner. But I didn't want to talk to anyone. Not right now. I quickly turned off my phone and shoved it back into my bag, not ready to face anyone. The next few hours were a blur. I walked aimlessly through the city, my mind a constant whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. I wanted to scream, to cry, to do anything to make the pain go away. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop thinking about the life I had built with Jason, the future we were supposed to have. It was all a lie. As the sun began to set, I found myself in a small park, sitting on a bench by myself. I felt the weight of everything crashing down on me. My hands shook as I fumbled through my bag and pulled out a crumpled pack of cigarettes I hadn't touched in months. I didn't even think twice before lighting one and taking a long drag, the smoke filling my lungs. It didn't help, but it numbed the edge of the pain for a moment. I didn't know how long I sat there, lost in my thoughts, until I heard footsteps approaching. I looked up to see Lily, standing a few feet away, her expression a mix of concern and confusion. I hadn't told her what had happened yet, but I could see the worry in her eyes. "Emily," she asked softly, taking a cautious step toward me. "What's going on? I've been trying to reach you." I didn't know what to say. How could I explain all of this? How could I make her understand that everything I had trusted, everything I had built, was falling apart? I found out something today," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. My throat felt tight, and for a moment, I thought I might start crying. But I couldn't. Not in front of her. Not yet. Lily sat down next to me, her eyes searching mine for answers. "What happened? What did you find out?" I hesitated for a moment, unsure if I was ready to say it out loud, but I knew I had to. She was my best friend. I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. "Jason," I said, the name leaving my mouth like venom. "He's been cheating on me. Not just with Sarah, but with someone else, too. I found out everything today." Lily's face fell as she processed what I had just said. "Oh my God, Emily. I had no idea. I'm so sorry." She reached out and pulled me into a tight hug. And for the first time since I had learned the truth, I felt a little bit of comfort. "I don't know what to do, Lily," I whispered, the tears I had been holding back finally starting to spill over. "I don't know who he is anymore. How could he do this to me?" Lily pulled back, holding me at arm's length, her eyes full of sympathy. "You don't have to figure it all out right now. Take your time. But you can't keep holding on to someone who's hurt you like this." I knew she was right, but the thought of letting go, of everything we had shared, all the memories and promises, felt impossible. It wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about the life I had imagined for myself, the future that was now uncertain. "I don't even know who I am without him," I admitted, my voice trembling. Lily looked at me with such sincerity. "You're you, Emily. You're so much more than him. You don't need him to define you." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. She was right. I had to find a way to move forward, even if I didn't know how yet. It was going to hurt, and it was going to take time, but I couldn't stay stuck in this cycle of lies and betrayal. As we sat there in the park, I felt a strange sense of relief begin to wash over me. Maybe it wasn't all going to be okay right now, but it would be someday. And for the first time in hours, I allowed myself to believe that. The days that followed felt like they were moving in slow motion. It was hard to focus on anything, and even harder to pretend like everything was okay. The images of Jason and the other woman kept flashing in my mind, and the betrayal ate away at me, piece by piece. I couldn't escape it. I couldn't escape him. Lily was a constant presence, checking on me daily, keeping me grounded when my thoughts started spiraling out of control. She knew how important Jason had been to me, how deeply I had trusted him, but she also knew how much I had to let go. Even if it was easier said than done, I couldn't continue to live in a world where everything I had believed in was a lie. It was Saturday afternoon when I finally decided to face him. It wasn't something I was excited about, and I wasn't sure what I expected to accomplish. I just knew I couldn't keep avoiding the inevitable. The truth was, I was angry. I was hurt beyond words, but I was also ready to move on, even if it meant having this final conversation. I texted him, "We need to talk." I didn't get a response right away, which only added to my growing frustration. I could picture him, sitting somewhere, trying to figure out his excuse, deciding whether or not he should face me. It didn't matter anymore. I wasn't waiting for his explanation. I was just going to say what needed to be said. An hour later, he finally called. My heart pounded in my chest as I answered, the familiar sound of his voice almost sending me into a tailspin. "Emily," he said, his tone a mix of hesitation and guilt. "I didn't expect you to reach out. I'm sorry about everything." I wasn't sure if I should laugh or cry at the way he started. His apology meant nothing to me now. The trust was gone, and the worst part was that I had never seen this coming. "Sorry," I repeated, my voice cold. "You think saying sorry is going to fix this? After everything you've done, you think an apology is enough?" There was a long pause. I could tell he was scrambling for words, but I didn't give him the chance to speak. I had waited long enough for him to come clean, to tell me the truth. And now that I had it, I was done. You lied to me, Jason. And not just once, over and over again. You made me think I was the one who was crazy when I started questioning things. And now, I'm supposed to just accept this, to forgive you. I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. I can't do that. I won't do that. His voice grew softer. I know I hurt you, Emily. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. It was a mistake. Please, just let me explain. I didn't want to hear any more excuses. I wasn't interested in hearing how sorry he was, or how much he regretted his actions. It was too late for that. The damage had been done. You don't get to explain yourself, Jason. You've had your chances, and you've thrown them all away. You've made your choices, and now I'm making mine. I paused, feeling the weight of what I was about to say. I'm done. I'm done with you. There was another pause, but this time, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel like I was making a mistake. I felt free, as if I had finally taken control over my own life again, after being trapped in the web of lies he had spun around me. I'm sorry, Emily, he said, his voice breaking. I never wanted to hurt you. I know, I whispered, the tears I had been holding back for days finally spilling over. But you did, and I can't fix that. Only you can fix yourself. The silence stretched between us, and I could feel it in my bones. The end of something that had once been so important to me. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how much better off I would be without him in my life. He had never truly valued me. He had never seen me for who I was. And I had been too blind to see it until now. I hope you figure it out, Jason, I said, my voice steady despite the tears. But I'm done being part of your mess. I hung up the phone before he could say another word. There was nothing left to say. Nothing that would change anything. I stared at the screen for a moment, feeling the weight of the decision settle in my chest. And then, for the first time in what felt like forever, I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile, not yet, but it was a smile of relief. The door had been closed, and I was standing on the other side of it. I didn't need him to be whole. I didn't need him to feel validated. All I needed was to take the next step, however small, into the unknown. And I was ready.
Thank you very much for watching. Did you like this story? Like, subscribe, and write a comment about your opinion.